So shortly after I arrived to begin pastoring in Fort Worth in 2013, I was introduced to this man with a really rad beard. So throughout this special sermon on not worrying, you will read quotes from arguably the greatest man of faith in the last few hundred years. So I'll start with a quote from George Mueller. The Christian should never worry about tomorrow or give sparingly because of a possible future need. Did you catch that? The Christian should never worry about tomorrow or give sparingly because of a possible future need. Only the present moment is ours to serve the Lord, and tomorrow may never come. Boy, we need to understand that tomorrow may never come. We're not promised tomorrow. Only the present moment is ours to serve the Lord, and tomorrow may never come. Money is really worth no more than as it can be used to accomplish the Lord's work. And life is worth as much as it is spent for the Lord's service. I hope you can understand that powerful truth. Life is worth as much as it is spent for the Lord's service. So in this passage today, I decided to give you a break from reading through. We've been watching those video clips of the passage. But so last week, I tried my best to preach through and discuss through the entire Sermon on the Mount. This week is the passage that you'll see there at the top. It begins, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And then this famous verse from Jesus, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And then in Matthew 7, verse 7, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. The word of the Lord from Matthew 6 and 7. So we're going to go through a few reasons we worry. This is not an exhaustive list. Okay, these are just a few lists or a few thoughts that I had today, and I hope they're helpful to you as you look through your own life and figure out, when do you worry? So here's number one. We are serving a cruel taskmaster and therefore should worry. See, Jesus says you shouldn't worry, but here's number one. Here's one reason why you should worry if you're serving someone other than Jesus. If you're serving the cruel taskmaster of money, well then absolutely, yeah, you ought to be worrying, and here's some reasons why. If money is your master, your work will never be enough. money's worth, it's worth less now than when you first received it due to inflation. Inflation has been going on, certainly in our country, for hundreds of years. And it's been around in modern Western culture for, not millennia, but many, many years. And so no matter what amount of money you received, whenever you received it, it's now worth less. It is constantly losing its value as inflation goes up. The gratification you receive from it will continually decrease. Consider a child versus an adult receiving $1. Picture a child, a little toddler, someone who's at least maybe a little older than a toddler, a child old enough to understand what money is, and you give them $1. Wow. And they think they could just buy anything with it, and they are so excited. And if I walk up to you and say, here you go, here's $1, you're going to be like, what's this for? Oh, it's a gift. $1. Wow, thanks. The value of the dollar has not changed, but your perception of it as you grows changes. It becomes less valuable, less special in your eyes. Another reason, whatever you buy with it soon loses its appeal, its value, or its usefulness. And we can think of exceptions. We could say, well, I bought a house and it increased in value. Well, perhaps, but also there's inflation, so everything costs more by the time you sell it later. But how many thousands of dollars in time and money did you spend on that house? So did it increase in value, or did you just put more into it and therefore you got more out of it? A car, as soon as you buy it, it's decreasing in value. Any bit of technology, oh my stars, does it increase in value so quickly. Anything you buy, it's gonna rust, it's gonna wear out, it's gonna rot, it's gonna deteriorate, or it's just gonna go out of style, and you and no one else are gonna want it anymore, right? And so everything we buy, it's gonna lose value, appeal, usefulness. Another reason, it easily disappears. Money easily disappears, and then you lose time and more money trying to find it. For example, theft. Or you have the famous Ponzi schemes, Bernie Madoff and stuff, and you had money in an account and someone embezzles it, and all of a sudden it's gone. And now you're losing time on paying an investigator, or paying a lawyer, or paying someone to try to get it back, or your things. If you have it, then you got to try to spend money and lose sleep trying to protect it, or buy an alarm system, but put up security cameras, or whatever it is. If money is your God, if it's your taskmaster, then yeah, you should worry. Here's another reason we might worry. Our focus is too small. And so Jesus reminds us about our focus when he says, look at the birds, and then the other quote, see how the flowers grow. Hyper-focusing on our own problems causes us to lose touch with reality, like not seeing birds who are still finding their food in the midst of your problem, or not seeing flowers growing in all their beauty. So when you lose touch with reality as you're dealing with your own stuff, you become, quote, the only one struggling with this, right? Anyone ever gone through a pity party? You're the only one. Yes, you are so special, and your situation is so incredibly unique that you are the only one. I am the only one in the world struggling with this. No, of course not. But we've become so hyper-focused on our issues that, of course, we would never consciously say that normally. Right? Maybe some moody teenager might, but of course as an adult we would probably not actually verbalize, I'm the only one going through this. And yet, if we're honest, sometimes our feelings can feel like we're the only ones going through it. No one has problems as bad as we do. No one has financial problems as bad as me. No one has health problems as bad as me. No one has marriage problems as bad as me. No one has a job problem as bad as me. No one understands, or there's nothing that we can do to improve it. And so we become so focused on ourselves, we've lost touch with reality. And so Jesus, using this picture, he reminds us, look up. Okay, your problem is not that unique, but also look up. God is providing for everything you see around you. He's providing for you too, but you've got to look up and not focus on your problem. Here's another possible reason we worry. We're not living as one of God's children, or we're not seeking first his kingdom. So when Jesus says, your heavenly Father knows that you need food and clothing, he assumes that his listeners are living as one of God's children. and in God's house, so to speak. So you remember the prodigal son story? So the prodigal son, the father has two boys. One boy says, I want my inheritance now. In other words, I wish you were dead and I got the benefits of your death right now. Give me my portion of the inheritance. And so for a while, as he leaves the father, yes, he has some residual benefits of being one of the father's children. But the further he goes from the father, the fewer benefits he can now reap from being close to the father. And he gets to the point where he has no benefits of being one of his father's children. And he certainly doesn't reap the benefits of being in the father's house, eating the father's food. And so he remembers as he's working in the pigsty for money and for trying to buy some food, he's looking at what they're eating and he thinks, man, this looks good. And suddenly he comes to his senses and says, my father's servants eat better than this. In other words, anyone living within my father's household, their basic needs are taken care of. And Jesus is speaking to people and he uses the language of fatherhood. God is their father. Well, you and I have need to worry if we have gone the way of the prodigal son and we have walked away from our father and we are living outside of the father's house, so to speak. And the longer we go down that path, the fewer and fewer benefits we will feel and experience from being one of God's children. And so when the Bible talks about the language of children, it's talking about it in a specific way. God, we believe here, God made everyone, right? But not everyone lives as one of God's children, okay? So when we've walked away from God, we won't experience the riches his house has to offer. And also, if we're not seeking his kingdom and his righteousness, then we are automatically seeking things other than God. Things that are guaranteed to disappoint and cause us worry. So Jesus makes it clear, friends, you can't serve God and money. You serve God and God alone, or you're serving something else. So there's no room in God's equation for God plus something. Now, you may think you're serving God and something else, but God says, no, you're just serving the other thing, and that thing is guaranteed to disappoint. So here's another quote from my friend George Mueller. Do you make it your primary business and your first great concern to seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness? Are the things of God, the honor of his name, the welfare of his church, the conversion of sinners, and the profit of your own soul your chief aim? Jesus commands it, but are you living it? Or does your business, your family, or your own temporal concerns primarily occupy your attention? Remember that the world will pass away, but the things of God will endure forever. I never knew a child of God who acted according to the above passage. He's writing and preaching about the same passage that we're talking about here. I never knew a child of God who acted according to the above passage, for whom the Lord did not fulfill his promise. All these things shall be added unto you. So Mueller's saying, if you are seeking first his kingdom and his righteousness, he will provide for you. Here's another reason that we worry. Because we worry. Now that seems strange. That doesn't make sense. We worry because we worry? Yes, because worry begets worry. Anyone remember what beget mean? Anyone read a King James Bible? Brings it on that the begats in the book of Matthew in the old King James. So-and-so begat so-and-so. It means to father, to give birth to, in this case, to bring about. Yeah. So worry begets worry. If we worry, we're disobeying God. Jesus said, don't worry. So if we worry, we're disobeying, right? And the Bible is filled with examples of how our disobedience clouds our judgment, causing us to make more sinful and unwise choices that cause more worry. Did you catch that? So if we worry, we're disobeying God. If we disobey God, we're sinning. And the Bible makes clear our sinfulness clouds our judgment. And as we walk down a path of sin, our judgment becomes more and more clouded. So if you want to use a metaphor like alcohol, the more you drink, the more you can't think straight, the more you can't make wise choices. So the billboard, "Don't drink and drive," is totally ignored by someone who's drunk because they're not in their right mind to look at that and say, I shouldn't drink and drive. The same thing is happening with sin. The more you sin, the more you are so intoxicated with sinfulness that you can't think straight in the ways God is wanting you to think. And you end up making more and more sinful choices that cause more and more worry in your life. So the great example of this is, I've put here in parentheses, worry can tempt us to go into debt. So for example, I was giving counsel to someone who made a terrible decision involving a car. They completely overpurchased. They bought so much more car than they need. They've struggled. They've had a long history of going to job to job to job and some homelessness and having to live with others and going long periods where they didn't have a job. And they dropped something, I don't know, they ended up, at the time they reached out to me for help, they still owed $11,000 on a car. So I don't know how much they paid for this car up front. And I said, well, I don't know that was a very wise decision. You owe more for this car than I paid for both my car and my wife's car. This is crazy. And this person said to me, well, I wanted to buy something that was reliable. Okay, well, and I'm thinking, well, I think you could find something reliable for less than like $15,000. But so out of fear, out of this worry that if I spend less, I might have increased car repair bills. Well, that's possible, yeah, and you start to buy less and less car, yeah, and, a $500 car might have a lot of car repair bills, right? But so because this person was worried about the potential of more car repair bills, they bought way more than they should, and they went into debt. But because they went into debt, they were so strapped for cash, and they had this massive car repair bill, and then they became so concerned about repossession that they were making some other poor choices. And so worry tempted them to sin and go into debt. The Bible talks about sin and says this is unwise to go into sin, friends. And that debt collector who was harassing this person was then pressuring the person to make more unwise decisions because the debt collector was the loudest person in their ear, right? And so that's how it can happen. Worry can bring about more worry. Here's another reason we might worry. We're not being faithful with the little things. Man, this is so important. Whether it's money, time, resources, relationships, whatever. If we truly lack resources, anyone ever been in a situation where you felt like you truly lacked resources? It happens. Right? I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm lacking something and that I realize, this is a want. This isn't really a need. But there's other times when I feel like, no, I'm lacking something that feels so important. Well, if we truly lack resources, God may be withholding them. Or we squandered them, which, anyone ever done that before? You made a purchase and later you realize, man, that was just a really dumb use of my money, right? But it's possible that you're lacking because God might be withholding them until we learn to faithfully steward what He's already given us. So I've been preaching last week and this week out of Matthew, the famous Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7. Jesus gave much of the exact same teaching another place, and it's recorded during a different chain of events in the passage, the book of Luke. And so in that same passage where Jesus is saying a lot of the same things, Luke includes a quote from Jesus that doesn't appear in Matthew's account of this teaching. Look at this from Luke 16. Jesus says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much." So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? Verse 12, "And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own?" Now, one of the things I say a lot, I haven't said it in a while around here because we really haven't been talking about money as we've been preaching through the New Testament so far. One of the things I say a lot is money comes from God, not people. Everything you have is from God. Doesn't matter how hard you worked for it. I assure you, I think you would admit this, there are people in third world and developing countries around the world who have worked just as hard as you and me, and yet they have less. There's farmers in the Horn of Africa who have worked and put in so many more hours than you and I have, but they're living with absolutely nothing, and their economies are shattered, and one famine can wipe out all they have done. And when you read the world news and you watch it on TV and you're reminded that, I hope you can acknowledge and see that what you have and what I have does not come simply from our hard work. Should you work hard? Of course, yes. But can you work hard and have less to show for it? Yes. Can you strive and want to work hard, but because of a physical disability or something like that, you just can't? Yeah. Every good and perfect thing, says the book of James, comes from the Father above. The Father of the heavenly lights is how he says it. Every good thing we have is from God. Your health is from God. Your relationships are from God. Your money is from God. So this passage, when he says, if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, well, guess what, friends? Every bit of property that you have, it's actually not yours. Every bit of property I have, it's not mine. Do I work for a paycheck? Well, yes. Do I work hard and do I think you should work hard? Well, yes. But actually, everything I have, everything you have, it's God's, and you and I are stewarding it, right? So sometimes if you and I feel like we just don't have all the resources we feel like we should have, well, there's all sorts of reasons that might happen. Some of them are sin and not our sin, but other sin, right? And things that have absolutely nothing to do with us and they're outside of our control. But sometimes it's because God has looked at your actions and my actions, and he has said, you are not stewarding what I have given you well. Therefore, until you learn to take better care of it, I won't give you more. We get this, right? If you have a teenager, or if you were a teenager and parents let you drive a car, if you trash the car, if you go 150 down the highway and you get in a wreck, amazingly you're still alive from a wreck like that, are your parents going to go right out and buy you another car? No, because you don't know how to take care of what you've been given. So no wise parent is going to say, oh, well, here's something else to replace it. Until we learn to take care of the little God has given us, he says he often won't bless us with more. Another one, another reason we might worry or why we don't have what we think we should have, we haven't asked God or learned to ask with perseverance. Jesus teaches us to ask, seek, and knock. There's a cool little acrostic here. It's in the English. It's not in the Greek, in the original Greek when what Jesus probably was speaking in. But in English, it translates nicely, and so you can remember it. A-S-K, ask, seek, knock. So if Jesus is teaching us to do this, it must mean that we won't receive certain blessings from God until we obey this command. This is good parenting. A parent of a newborn is going to take care of that newborn's needs, regardless of whether or not the newborn knows how to ask or knows how to do anything to try to get help themselves. But as a child ages and grows, a wise and certainly a godly parent should teach a child certain things, such as, can you ask politely for that? Can you say, could I please have a sandwich, Mommy? And things like that. You teach your children to ask. Do you know that it's noon and they probably need to eat because their stomach's empty? Of course you do. But you're wanting to teach them something important, to ask, how to verbalize their request, and hopefully how to verbalize it politely. God is a loving parent with us. He knows our needs. And when we are young in our faith, and even when we're not even Christians, he knows our needs and he provides for us in ways that we didn't even realize he was providing. But as we grow, God says, okay, I want you to ask. And just as parents, as our children grow, there are things that we could do for them ourselves, right? But a wise parent will teach a child to work at something. So parents choose different ways to make it happen. So for example, instead of just giving some allowance money, doing some chores around the house, right? And their chores often aren't really that helpful, and the parent could do them better. And it's not like the child was truly doing something that was brought so much monetary value that it's like paying any adult that you would, right? But it's trying to teach the child to work, to persevere, to strive for something rather than it just be plopped in the child's hand. God is saying he's doing the same type of thing for us. He wants us, he will provide for us, but over time he wants us to ask. And then he wants us to work for certain things. And in this context, the work is the work of prayer. Surprisingly, the Bible actually calls prayer work. The Apostle Paul says he labors in prayer. Prayer is work. Sometimes it feels like such a blessing and you're talking with God and it's just awesome. And other times the Apostle Paul makes clear from his language, it is labor. And in one place he uses the analogy of a woman giving birth, saying sometimes prayer is painful and arduous and difficult, and it's so difficult it feels like giving birth. It's hard work. And just like a parent, a wise parent, teaches a child the importance of hard work, God teaches us to travail, is the old language of it, to work at prayer, to labor at it. And in so doing, there are some things that he will give us only after we have done the hard, laborious work of prayer. So are there some things that you just really want? Well, there's some things a child really wants, right? Work at it. Work for it. And you might find if you work in prayer, God might answer. Where am I? This another quote from George Mueller. Never attempt to carry your own burden. I love this language here, but learn to roll it upon the Lord. Get this word picture? So he's using this picture of like carrying a yoke or carrying something upon your back, something that's so heavy that you have to be careful in how you like let it go. You know, and the picture is like you're carrying this weight on your back. And it's like you just walk up to Jesus next to you and you just kind of roll it off your shoulder onto his. I love that picture. Never attempt to carry your own burden, but learn to roll it upon the Lord. Seek to deal with him about everything. Everything. If you have any trial, any perplexity, cast it upon him. I've vented to people before about this or that issue. And some of them, bless their hearts, if they know me well enough and they're bold enough to speak truth, they've asked a powerful question. Have you prayed about it? Well, no. Leave me alone. As this painful reminder that, wow, I've thought about it, and I've created some great arguments of what I'm going to say to that person the next time I see it, or whatever it is, or I've tried to Google my way to figure out a solution, but no, I haven't prayed about it. Oh, well, maybe you ought to pray about it, Chris. Okay, yes, I should. And Miller reminds us, everything, bring it all to Jesus. Cast it upon him, then you will find out how ready he is to help. And you will be able to say, even in view of all these circumstances, I am happy. Once again, just like a good parent, we have to do this with our boys. Kelly does it so much better than I do. I don't know what it's like to raise girls. But with little boys, what is definitely common in our house is we hear a lot of grunts of frustration. That type of stuff all the time. You're just hearing it. And Kelly, she's just great about it. And what's happening is they're frustrated about something, sibling struggles, or some toy that's not cooperating, or whatever it is. And Kelly will just say, "It sounds like you need to ask for help." And they'll be reminded that moment. They'll say, "Mommy, can you help me, please?" And of course she says, "Sure, I'd be happy to help." I think so often, that's what God is wanting to say to us. We're just down here grunting and growling and yelling at people. And God is saying, sounds like you need to ask for help. And when we do, he'll say, "Sure, I'd be happy to help." So this last one, Jordan, if you want to tell Miss Donna that we'll be wrapping up here and we'll close with a song. The last reason, and again, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just a few that I thought of, and then I ran out of room on the page, so I stopped. But I saved this one for the end because it's the most important. The last reason of this list of reasons we might worry is we don't truly understand the type of Heavenly Father God is. If you don't have a proper understanding of God, you're going to worry. And for some of us, we have very understandable reasons for why we worry, right? So if we didn't have a good relationship with our father, or if our father was absent. My mom, for example, her dad died when she was 2. She has no memories of her father. And so I remember her sharing in the past how early on she struggled with the analogies and the metaphors throughout the Bible of God as Father because she never knew a father and her mom never remarried. So it just didn't click. It didn't resonate with her. But if you've had a bad relationship with your father, well, then absolutely I could see how you might struggle with this. But if you've picked up some bad theology about who God is a mean guy in the sky, God is ready to get you, God is unhappy with you, God has given you a list of rules and do's and don'ts, and that's all he cares about. Or even if you've gone to the other extreme, as can happen certainly in modern American culture, God is just some sort of, Santa Claus or something, and he will never lovingly discipline you. There's no concept in your idea of God that God, the most loving thing God might do for you is actually give you some discipline that you don't want, but you desperately need, right? So if you've picked up wrong ideas about God, especially views that are negative and see God as judgmental, or you don't understand, you don't see how God will take care of you, you're going to keep struggling with worry. You just will, okay? But as Jesus reforms people's understandings about God and therefore increases their faith in him, that's a typo on your bulletin. The word "as" shouldn't be there. It should just be a statement. Jesus reforms people's understandings about God and therefore increases their faith in him. So what Jesus is doing in the Sermon on the Mount is he's reshaping some of the misconceptions of who this God is in the mind of the average ancient Jewish person. He's saying God is a heavenly Father who loves you. If you, as an earthly parent, understand and get the importance of taking care of your child and wanting to give good gifts to them, he said, how much more is God going to do the same with you? But that next sentence, but if we don't take time to study Jesus' words and the law and the prophets that Jesus quoted, we'll never be free from worry. So this is a bold statement, I understand. You will never be free from worry until you have a proper understanding of the Christian God, whom we most perfectly see in Jesus. Jesus is the perfect embodiment and representation of who God is. And if God would come to earth to live and die for us, how much more would he provide our every need as we follow him? So that's what Jesus is trying to teach in the Sermon on the Mount, and that's what he's trying to live out in his life. Jesus moves into our neighborhood. In John 1, there's this famous passage, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And then Eugene Peterson came out with the Message, kind of a modern paraphrase of the Bible. And his phrase, it's just a cool phrase. God took on flesh and moved into the neighborhood. And it wasn't a good neighborhood either. It was a neighborhood that ended up killing him. So if you and I feel like we live in the wrong side of town and going through our life, God is moving into that neighborhood with us. And if we understand that that's who God is, most visibly seen through Jesus, then we go through life not thinking, oh, I shouldn't worry, I shouldn't worry, I shouldn't worry. No, we go through life thinking, I have no need to worry. Because the same God who would come to earth and live and die for me will certainly provide my every need. And when we understand that, it brings joy to our life. George Miller in that last quote, happiness, or from the Sermon on the Mount, the famous Beatitudes, it brings about an understanding of how blessed we are. We have no need to worry when we understand who God is. And if there's ever a time that worry is creeping up in our hearts, let it be a diagnostic to reveal that something has gone amiss in our lives and in our relationship with Jesus. Maybe we've begun to go down one of the paths of one of these 7 here. We've walked into sin, or we've worried and continued to allow that worry to grow, and worry begets worry, or one of these here. But when we understand who Jesus is, he loves us, he died for us, he lives for us, and he certainly will provide for us, so we have no need to worry. And that brings joy. So we're going to close with a song. It's a song we sung before, so you should be familiar with it. It's called Joy. I think that's just the name of it. So let's stand as we close and sing this song together.